So, morning students. So, in this class, we are going to learn about the methods of early nationalists. So, you know who are these early nationalists? So, these are the people who were there with Indian National Congress from the beginning of the party. So, certain Indian leaders who were there from the beginning of Indian National Congress were called early nationalists. So, these early nationalists, so they have, let me highlight here certain things. See this constitutional agitation method and legal framework, and you take, you know, two objectives. So what happens here is early nationalists, they have chosen constitutional agitation method. So they wanted to work within the legal framework of the Britishers. So they are very loyal to British. These early nationalists, they're very loyal and they had a lot of faith on the the British people. So the early nationalists always choose methods which are in the legal framework of Britishers. So the British are the lawmakers for India by this time. So whatever laws they have made, these early nationalists were abiding by that laws and they were agitating at the same time. They were never going against the laws of British. Within the laws of British, they are just taking the issues of Indians to their notice. And these early nationalists and their methods, so their methods can be referred as constitutional method, and right? So constitutional agitation method, they said. So these whatever methods they have taken, they have two objectives. Okay, let us see what are those objectives of their methods. So first set of methods. So see, this is not that something that they have divided. Just for our understanding, the historians have categorized this into first set of methods and second set of methods. Let us see what are these first set of methods. See, we were discussing now the objectives. So let me highlight here: educate people in India in modern politics, national political consciousness, united public opinion, and so what are the following methods they have did? See, we know early nationalists adopted constitutional way of agitation method. In that, there are some other categories of methods. So there are some, what do you call, like action sequence, like, they were trying to do certain things. So their objective was very clear. What are their objectives now? If you look at their objectives, it is, first thing is educate people in India. So they want people of India to be educated. Where in modern politics, the methods adopted by these early nationalists had objectives. First objective is educate people in India. Second objective is create political consciousness. So they want people of India to join in politics actively so that they can participate in national movement. They want people of India to be aware of the political consciousness. So what Indian National Congress is doing, what kind of steps it is taking for nationalism, all such things they wanted to create awareness among people, and they want people to be aware of those things and create a united public opinion. See, India was diverse by that time. So they want people of India to have a common opinion, common public opinion, common public interest. Why they need common public interest? Because in the common public interest of Indian National Congress is solving the problems of Indians through the British by being loyal to British. So even they wanted Indians to have a strong opinion to come and join in politics and fight against British within the legal framework. So to achieve these objectives called educate people in politics, create political consciousness, and create public opinion, they have adopted some methods. So what are those methods? So the first set of they held meetings, So what did they do? They held meetings, resolutions for popular demands. So let me highlight, then I'll discuss. So use of press to criticize government policies, sent memorandums, petitions, and so they were addressed to the government. These petitions were addressed to government. So the real aim was to educate the Indian people. So what methods they have? In the first set of methods, they have their own specificity. Hence they are called first set of methods. To achieve the objective of educating people, creating political consciousness, creating public opinion, early nationalists used certain methods. What are those methods? In that first set of methods, they held meetings, speeches were given, resolutions were passed. So they conducted regular meetings in public, gave speeches, and they made resolutions. They took some decisions in that meeting. So that decisions will be the goal for those people. I mean, for all the people. Second thing they did what? Used press, that is print media. So through newspapers, they criticized the government policies. So sent memorandums or requests, petitions. So this is one way, by arranging meetings and giving speeches. In papers and all, criticizing the policies of British is one another way. Third way is sending request of that is no request letters to British government officials and parliament. Okay, they send petitions, they send request letters about their problems. To whom they have to send? To British government officials as well as parliament in England. So to all these things they used to send memorandums and petitions. So to whom these were addressed? These were addressed to the government. What was the aim of addressing these petitions and memorandums? So to educate the Indian people. So the real aim was they want people to know what is happening in the country. So let us see now what are the second set of methods. Okay, so in this second set of methods, they see what was the objective. We just now learned what was the objectives of first set of methods. In second set of methods, let me highlight and then I'll explain. So here, to influence the British government and British public, and what are the methods they use to achieve this objective. So petitions, prayers, protests, and British Committee of Indian National Congress, and deputation of Indian leaders, and also, so see, these are all the points which you need to remember in this paragraph. And let me explain now. The early nationalists adopted even certain other kind of methods. First set of methods were focused on Indians, to create awareness to Indians, to create political education to Indians and other things. Second set of methods were to targeted with the British government and British public. So British government and British public were the objective for early nationalists. So they wanted to influence them by making the British government in England and British public aware of the situations in India. They wanted to create some influence. They wanted to put some pressure on British government as well as British Parliament. And to achieve these objectives, the early nationalists used second set of methods. So what are the methods they did to achieve this objective of influencing British government and British public? They used the three P's. So what are those? Petitions, prayers, which are nothing but requests, and protest. Protest means, suppose you take, they come to a rally, they go for a dharna and all, but they do it in a legal framework. They never resort to violence and all. So they send petitions, requests, and letters to protest the British government to look into the problems. This is one method they adopted to achieve the objective of influencing British government and British public. So why they wanted to influence British public? Because by this time England was democratic. So people elected their government there. So if people come to know what kind of problems that this British government is creating in India, they may feel bad about the government and they may try to influence, they may try to change the governments there. So the political parties here were very afraid of the people's vote. So they were also worried if the people may influence with the Indians and their problems, and it might cause trouble to their governments. So in that way, our early nationalists thought, and they just they just started taking the Indian issues even to the notice of British public, so that the governments will in turn feel the pressure. So first thing is petitions, prayers, and protests they have used. Second method was the second method they adopted to influence British government was a British Committee of Indian National Congress was set up in London in 1889. Okay, and so you can call it like Indian National Congress had set up a British committee in London. So on behalf of Indian National Congress, a committee will represent the British government and British public in London. So from India, on behalf of Indian National Congress, a group of people will represent Indians in London. So through their journal called India, they used to write many articles and know many news items and many other things, and they just try to influence the government and people there. And deputation of Indian leaders sent to Britain. So some leaders who are working in India for Indian National Congress Party, they were sent on deputation. Deputation means they were also sent to Britain. Those who are working in India, they were sent to Britain. So what they have to do? They have to do active propaganda in Britain. So they have to talk about the importance of Indian problems in Britain. So, for example, Dadabhai Naoroji spent a major part of his life in Britain to create awareness among British people. So, which itself says that he is like a he's a congressman, but still he's working in Britain for the goals and objectives of Indians. So that's how some Indian leaders were also sent. And so let us see the other methods now. So what exactly now these people have achieved? Early nationalists with their first set of methods, second set of methods, what did they achieve? That is our topic now. See, let me highlight first and then I'll describe. See, early nationalists represented the most progressive force. So they were progressive force and they made the following contributions. Created national awakening among people, then trained people, sorry, trained people in politics and did pioneering work by exposing the true nature of British. So if you look at the achievements of early nationalists through their first set of methods and second set of methods, they acted as a progressive nature. So the methods adopted by the early nationalists were progressive. That means they were very useful. So what are their contributions now? What exactly they achieved? They could create national awakening among people. So they, what is national awakening here? That is, people of India came to know about what is Indian National Congress, what are its objectives, how this party is helping to achieve our to solve our problems, and what are our political goals, why Indians are needed to join politics, economically how they are you know facing problems, cultural interests are how we are going to save our cultural interests. All these things were made aware to people. Second achievement of early nationalists was they trained people in democracy, civil liberties, secularism, and nationalism. So democracy was a new concept by this time. Only England was having people electing their own governments, right? This kind of government and all concepts were given to people in India. The people of India came to know about all these concepts called democracy. Civil liberties means our rights. Secularism means how to tolerate with other religions, and nationalism. All such new ideologies were brought to the awareness of Indians by early nationalists. They trained, in fact, early nationalists have trained Indians in that. So they also did pioneering work exposing the true nature of British. So these congressmen or the early nationalists, they were the beginners who understood how British were exploiting India. So they were the first people. Pioneering work means they're the people who did the first set of work to expose the true nature of British. Okay, so they made people to realize the economically how India was being looted and what is British imperialism, how British was conquering all other places throughout the world, what is its imperialistic character. So by taking all these issues to people, they tried to weaken the foundations of British rule in India. So by this, these are certain kind of achievements that the early nationalists have achieved. So we are discussing about the achievements of early nationalists through their first set of methods or second set of methods, whatever it may be. So let us see what are the remaining achievements that they have made. So another important achievement that they have made is the political and economic programs established the truth that India must be ruled in the interest of Indians. So the programs taken up, okay, whatever the programs that these early nationalists have taken up, so whether it may be political or economical programs, so you take any agitation, you take any resolution passed by them, they all come under the programs. So these see, we just discussed in this previous class, right? There are some reforms that these early nationalists have demanded. Suppose in political sphere, they said abolish councils and all. In economic sphere, they said reduce the land revenue, and also they asked protection from they asked us to start agricultural banks. So these are all the demands kept by these early nationalists in terms of political and economic. So they said the programs that these early nationalists have taken up has really established the truth, okay, with terms to political and economic issues. The programs taken up by the early nationalists have established the truth that India must be ruled in the interest of Indians, not in the interest of Britishers. So India must be ruled in the interest of Indians. So what is interest of Indians? This interest of Indians has been covered in the demands. Okay, you can see in your textbook the demands of early nationalists, economic demands, political demands, and constitutional demands. Many such demands are there. If you refer that demands, you will come to know what are the interests of Indians. So that is itself an achievement. They could successfully take these demands to the notice of British. The efforts of early nationalists led to following reforms. So what changes exactly has happened, that we will see. Appointment of a public service commission in 1886. So they wanted Indianization of services. So the early nationalists have asked Indianization. That means we need our own local service commission to conduct our local exams. No need to depend on the Indian civil service and all. So which were conducted in England. They want Indianization of services. They want to get Indians to be recruited in government offices. So one public service commission has been appointed in 1886. So even today we practice this public service commission concept. And a resolution of the House of Commons for simultaneous examination for ICS in London and India. So the efforts of the early nationalists have finally contributed to certain changes in Indian administrative system. So in the Indian affairs, there were finally some changes. One is that we have discussed the appointment of Public Service Commission, so through which Indian people gets recruited, and A resolution of the House of Commons in 1893 for simultaneous examination both in London and India. So Indian Covenant Service or Indian Civil Service exam was due to the policies of Lord Lytton, it was conducted only in England. It was the center of examination was taken away from India and it was kept only in England. So which was a very big trouble for Indians to write the exam. So the House of Commons, which is like Lok Sabha in India, if you take the modern terminology, and even today, for England they call it as House of Commons, whereas in India we call it as Lok Sabha, like that. So in England, the House of Commons has passed a resolution in England's Parliament. That resolution made so even India has examination center for civil services exam. That was a great achievement that was uh, which was brought by the early nationalists. Also, British appointed Welby Commission on Indian expenditure. So the early nationalists have always demanded that they need an inquiry committee for reporting why famines are happening more in India. So this was the demand of early nationalists. The early nationalists in their demands, economic demands, they said there are a number of famines in a such a prosperous country like India. Why it is slowly slipping into famines and droughts? On this, the early nationalists demanded an inquiry. So, with very close relation to that, the British have appointed a Welby Commission. So, this commission has to, the work of this commission is to know the details of Indian expenditure. What is that the British doing in India with the taxes getting collected? So, in what way they are spending the expenditure on Indians? This was appointed in 1895, so which is an important achievement. And the Indian Councils Act 1892. So this is another important act. So in constitutional reforms or the demands that was asked by the so-called early nationalists, they said expand the councils, abolish the already existing council, and expand the council. So for this purpose, the British Parliament has passed Indian Councils Act, through which this act allowed Indians, more number of Indians to get into both provincial councils as well as the central council, Viceroy's Council. So entry of more Indians into provincial councils and the central council was a great achievement which was possible through this Indian Councils Act. This was passed by British Parliament. So these achievements of early nationalists served as a base of national movement in later years. So these all things have boosted up the confidence of these nationalists and they further worked more and more. So yes, till now we have seen the positive side of the coin. We studied what are the achievements, what are the great demands that were kept by early nationalists in front of British. Now let us see the criticism of the early nationalists. That means in what the negative side of them. You can call like why certain people didn't like the early nationalists. So the early nationalists have been criticized on the following grounds because there are certain areas on which these early nationalists were not agreed with. People were not agreeing with, or a group of congressmen were not agreeing with certain ideologies or certain methods of these early nationalists. What are they? That we will see. The methods used by early nationalists, like passing resolutions, sending petitions, were criticized as inadequate. So that means they will go with a petition, they'll go with a what do you call request like memorandums, but they are very humble and they're very faithful here, and they were always trying to request the British authorities, which never, the amount of request or the way they kept request with British, the response from British was not in such a same proportion. Of course, the British passed some acts and all, they tried to pacify Indians, but still there is a lot of things to do. To achieve those things, some people thought these early nationalists by these petitions, criticizing them, resolutions passing is not enough. This methodology will not work to proportionately get benefit from British. They said it is inadequate. They depended on generosity of the British instead of relying on their own strength. So a group of people, congressmen, felt these early nationalists were in fact afraid of the British. Why do you think these early nationalists were so humble, so faithful with the British? Why can't they depend on their strength and fight with the British? Why were they unable to do this? Why they want always a very faithful approach, a very humble approach, very, what do you say, a low profile approach with the British? Don't they have strength to face the truth and fight with the British? This was the argument of certain other critics. They were unhappy with the methods adopted by early nationalists. They failed to realize that British and Indian interests clashed with each other. Britain was using India's resources to increase its wealth. So, the early nationalists always wanted to take the issue to the British and get it solved. But the reason for the problem is British, isn't it? So, we got a problem. Suppose a weaver is there, he is having high, suppose a farmer is there, high tax is collected. Now, this problem is taken in the form of a petition to British government. Now, the interest of Indian is reduce taxes for farmer. What about the interest of British? They wanted more taxes. Now, these early nationalists went to British and they said reduce the tax for our Indian farmer. Now, if they reduce the tax, the interest of British will clash. If they don't reduce, if they if they don't reduce the tax, then the interest of Indians will get affected. So here, the approach taken by these people are the approach taken by early nationalists is having a clash of interest with both, so which will never get solved. They said their interest they won't sacrifice. Your interest, you are taking it in the form of petition, which will never work out. The interest which you take it up, or the problems which the early nationalists take it up to British, are their wealth generating interest. So the British would never agree for such things. If you go with this approach, they would never agree at least. The early nationalists failed to draw the masses into the mainstream of the national movement. So the major drawback of these early nationalists was they never involved the masses, the common people. They always had this background of educated people, lawyers, intellectuals, and all such things. Never involved the majority population into national movement. That was a great criticism of early nationalists. The area of influence was limited to urban educated Indians. In particular, their leadership was confined to professional groups such as lawyers, doctors, journalists, and teachers. Don't you think the masses, the common people, the majority sections in India should be into this movement? Only when the majority involves, the problems will solve, but they never take them into consideration. Early nations always felt that no, these common people, they don't have education, they cannot convince the British, so it is a duty of educated people to do all these things. So they involved always the educated people, which received a serious criticism. So let us see now the official attitude towards the Congress. So how was British looking at the Congress? By the way, the working of early nationalists and the way they were taking up the movement in the country and other such things. Let us see how these Britishers were looking at the things going on in India. So in the beginning, the British government looked upon the Congress movement with favor. So they thought, yes, the early nationalists were very loyal and faithful to them. So let them bring some issues. If not everything, let's solve some of the issues and uh, reflect themselves as very friendly to Indians. This was the idea of Britishers in the beginning. But in fact, a few government officials attended the first session of Congress and took part in its deliberations. So even you can understand how favorable they were, how friendly Britishers were to Indian National Congress. You can imagine that Lord Dufferin, who was the viceroy, he attended the second session of Indian National Congress, right? See, Indian National Congress is a Indian political party. So even then, a British people, no, they attended this session of the Congress and they took part in deliberations. So this was the attitude. So initially, whatever issues they have brought, they were looking with a very friendly approach, and the Congress was given high respect in the British terms. And the Congress members were invited to a garden party by the Viceroy. So, in fact, the Congress members were also invited to a garden party by Viceroy Lord Dufferin in Kolkata. So, Lord Dufferin was the Viceroy, and he was so close to congressmen that he invited them to a party even, and also the governor of Chennai. Okay, but this was to the one side of the coin. The British were looking very friendly and very humble, very faithful to even the congressman. But the official attitude soon changed. So very soon there was a shift from this attitude. So this shift in attitude happened because of various reasons. Lord Dufferin tried to divert the national movement by suggesting to Hume that Congress should devote itself to social rather than political affairs. This is very important. So Lord Dufferin, what he suggested A.O. Hume was the Indian National Congress is involving in the political affairs, like it is asking some political demands, abolition of councils, expand the councils, involve more Indians. This kind of things were demanded from congressmen, which Lord Dufferin felt that Indian National Congress should not involve in political affairs. It should devote more itself to social affairs. That means about the evils in society. These kind of things they can fight, but not asking for all these kind of political changes with reference to India. Lord Dufferin asked A.O. Hume that why don't you recommend Congress not to involve in the political affairs of British with India. So as just now we have discussed, Lord Dufferin was trying to slowly, Congress to move the Congress away from its political demands. So he does not want Congress to focus on the political issues. So what he did in 1887, Lord Dufferin attacked the National Congress in his speech and ridiculed it as representing only a microscopic minority of the people. So that is, Lord Dufferin understood that slowly Indian National Congress is gaining popularity and it is trying to politically bring changes in India, which he doesn't like. He said in an open speech that Congress is just representation of a microscopic minority. As I told these early nationalists, okay, they are all people from educated community, Indian educated community. So in the criticism of early nationalists, we studied that they never involved the masses, the common people. That he took it as a weapon. He said that Congress party is full of educated Indians and other people, and only a minority of Indians were being represented in Congress. The resolutions or the decisions made by Congress is not the will of majority Indians. They are just representing a microscopic minority of Indians. That shows that he is against Congress. British officials criticized National Congress and branded it as leaders as the disloyal babus and violent villains. So an open attack has been started from British side on Indian National Congress. They said that they are all disloyal. They said that they will be loyal to British, but by asking political changes, by asking many other changes, they said they can't be these congressmen are not loyal to British. They're disloyal and they're in fact trying to create violence in the country. So this kind of allegations were made on Congress. You can just understand how the shift has changed. In the beginning, they were very friendly. Even Lord Dufferin attended the Congress sessions, and he gave a party in Kolkata to all the congressmen, and they were very accepting all the petitions and pretending as if they were looking into all the things. But this is the true state of affairs. Finally, Lord Dufferin has completely gone against the policies or the methods adopted by the early nationalists or the congressmen. So in 1890, the government employees were forbidden from participating in the Congress deliberations. So this was a huge, uh, what do you call? It was a huge a restriction on Indian National Congress. This was a restriction. So what the British did, the government employees, so those days even government employees who were Indians working for British, they even used to participate in the national movement and other agitations. Now, they used to go and attend Congress sessions. Now, British has made a rule that any person, any Indian who is working as an employee for British government cannot participate in Congress meetings. So all the government servants who are working for British cannot participate in Congress meetings or their deliberations because they realized that the growing unity, okay, so growing unity of the Indians posed a major threat to their rule. They felt that with the Congress and its activities, there is a chance of Indians getting united, which they don't want to happen. So to break that activity of early nationalists from Indian National Congress, they forbidden, that means they prohibited all the government employees who are Indians working for British to not attend any meetings of Indian National Congress because they felt it as a threat. The British pushed further the policy of divide and rule. So they adapted the policy of divide and rule. They wanted to divide the Indians. Now see the government servants who are even Indians, they cannot go to Congress. Now what Congress people will feel, oh these people wanted to serve more government rather than Indians. So this kind of division will turn up between the people. So that they want, divide and rule. So they encouraged Syed Ahmad Khan, Raja Shivaprasad of Banaras, and other pro-British individuals to start an anti-Congress movement. They sowed seeds of communalism between Hindus and Muslims. So Syed Ahmad Khan and Raja Shivaprasad, who are pro-British individuals, that means they were having a lot of faith on British, but at the same time, they were more, you can call them as more orthodox kind of people who were, they want their religions to be represented properly in Congress. So these people, they were encouraged against Congress, like Syed Ahmad Khan, Shiv Prasad of Banaras. You can see now they are encouraging Hindus and Muslims against Congress. And moreover, they also sowed seeds of communalism between Hindus and Muslims on one hand and between the Indian masses and their leaders on the other hand. So by creating gap between people and Indian National Congress or by creating gap between Hindus and Muslims, the Britishers started playing the game of divide and rule. Whoever are very close to British and little bit upset with Congress, they were all encouraged. And between Hindus and Muslims, they sowed the seeds of communalism that see the Congress party, there is no representation for Muslims, only Hindus are dominating. For Hindus, they say that see slowly they are trying to increase the number of Muslims, which is a threat to Indian Hinduism. This kind of you know division seeds were sowed between Hindus and Muslims. They followed even a policy of granting minor concessions to put down the growth of nationalism. So, to decrease the speed at which the nationalism is growing, the Britishers were very afraid. They were not happy with the speed, that they were afraid that the speed at which the nationalism is going is a threat to them. So they even gave some concessions to congressmen and the people to reduce that speed and to reduce the impact of nationalism that was developed by Congress. However, their policy of repression and hostility made Congress more powerful. So when they tried to stop the activities of Congress by disallowing government servants, by creating gap between Hindus and Muslims, when all such policies were taken up, even then, Congress trying to be, even then Congress slowly started emerging powerful. So that was the, so however, their policy of repression and hostility made Congress more powerful. So the more they tried to inhibit Congress, the more the Congress became powerful. So that was the impact of Congress, how the British were looking at Congress. So there were some prominent early nationalist leaders, okay, like Dadabhai Nauroji. These were the early nationalist leaders who were representing Congress as well as trying to solve problems of India. Dadabhai Nauroji, popularly known as Grand Old Man of India, was born in Parsi family in Mumbai. So Dadabhai Nauroji, born in Mumbai, he was famously called Grand Old Man of India, and he was a professor of mathematics in Elphinstone College at Mumbai. So he left the teaching profession, went to England, and as a partner in firm, he returned to. So he went to England in 1855, and he was elected to the Mumbai Municipal Corporation. So he was working from London. So he was a very attracted towards the national movement and formation of Indian National Congress. And what he did, he was in London initially through his East India Association. He used to work for Indian problems, taking it to their notice. But later on, he returned to Mumbai and he was elected to Municipal Corporation of Mumbai. So he founded the Bombay Association, and he has a newspaper by name Rast Goftar, that means Speaker of Truth. So after he returned from London, he got elected as he got elected to Mumbai Municipal Corporation, and he had an organization by name Bombay Association. Also, he had a newspaper by name Rast Goftar. He has a magazine by name Dharma Marg Darshak. He started movements against Vernacular Press Act and atrocious treatment of poor peasant by Jamindar. So he was very prominent leader who worked in Indian National Congress, who worked in the formation of Indian National Congress. Also, he was very popular in taking the Indian problems to the notice of Britishers. So, what are his contributions? What exactly did this man contributed? So, during his stay in England, Dadabhai was looked upon as India's unofficial ambassador. That means he was representing India in England. He used to take a lot of issues of India to both the British Parliament as well as British public. So he was fighting for the cause of the country. He founded London India Society in collaboration with W.C. Banerjee to publicize grievance of Indians. So in 1865, what Dadabhai Naoroji did? He founded London India Society. With whom? With W.C. Umesh Chandra Banerjee. What is this London India Society's aim or goal? Take the grievances of Indians, publicize, give it more publicity to both British government and the British public. He was the first Indian to become the member of British House of Commons in England. So you know what is House of Commons, right? It is like Lok Sabha, lower house in England. So he even became member of the lower house of England's parliament. First Indian to become a MP in that in their member of House of Commons. He was a member of British Parliament. He brought a notice of House important matters related to India. See, once an Indian becomes a member to British House of Commons, naturally, and person like Dadabhai Naoroji, he would definitely take the issues to the House of Commons whenever he gets a chance to speak. So he was always speaking in favor of appointing educated Indians to higher posts. It was due to his efforts House of Commons passed holding ICS examination both in England and India. So after Dadabhai Naoroji got elected to House of Commons, which is lower house in England Parliament, he took the Notice of Education of Indians and ICS examination, which the House agreed upon, and they passed a resolution to shift the to also have an exam center in India for Indians to write Indian Civil Service exam. It was this man who has brought that change. So in 1866, he founded the East India Association in London. So this we have studied in our previous class what is East India Association, what was it doing. So and it had its branches even in Kolkata, Mumbai and Chennai. So the main branch was there in London, and it used to take the issues of Indian problems to British Parliament as well as the British public. So it had its even branches in Kolkata in India, Mumbai and Chennai. So what was Dadabhai Naoroji's role in Congress? That we will see. So it is praiseworthy. That means there is a lot of contribution to Indian National Congress. He took an active part in the foundation of Indian National Congress. This right? So when Evo Hume was talking with the Indian delegates to found Indian National Union, which was referred as precursor of Indian National Congress. During that time, it was Dadabhai Naoroji who negotiated with Evo Hume and was majorly responsible for Indian National Congress formation. He was elected its president thrice. That means he worked for Congress three times as president. In 1886, which is second one, 1893 and 1906. So three terms he worked as a Congress president. And under his presidency, Congress party every year that it will meet in December at one place, right? So the resolutions under Dadabhai Naoroji's presidency was self-government, boycott foreign goods, Swadeshi goods usage, national education. So these all topics were raised as Congress resolutions during the presidency of Dadabhai Naoroji. So the credit for demanding Swaraj from Congress platform for the first time, 1906, in his presidential address, he said that Congress wanted self-government like that of UK or the colonies. So it was Dadabhai Naoroji who was demanding this Swaraj from Congress platform. So this was a major role that Dadabhai Naoroji played in Congress. So what else he did apart from Congress and apart from his achievements as forming associations and electing to House of Commons? What else he did? Expose the economic ills. That means he was very much aware of the economic exploitation that the Britishers are doing in India. He exposed that economic exploitation of British to the entire Indians. He was an economic thinker. He came to conclusion that the root cause of economic ills was the exploitation of India by British. So he strongly believed that all the economic problems that Indians are facing is because exploitation of India by British. He understood it very clearly. So he just wrote all his views in his work called Poverty and Un-British Rule in India. That means because of British, poverty is very much in India. So he said if you take out the British rule from India, then poverty can be lost. Or unrule means the misrule that is happening in British and how it is giving poverty to Indians. His famous drain theory, okay, drain theory was also very famous. Poverty and un-British rule in India was also famous. It explained how India's wealth was drained to England through various ways. So, in his books called Drain Theory and Poverty and Unrule British in India, so he exposed how exactly these Britishers are taking away the wealth from India. So finally, this great man, Dadabhai, was passed away 1917 with a selfless service to nation. So he had no self-interest or any selfish interest, but always throughout his life, He was working for people of India. So in the words of C.Y. Chintamani, the public life of India had been adorned by a galaxy of brilliant intellects and selfless patriots, but there has been in our time none comparable with Dadabhai Naoroji. So Chintamani said, see, many brilliant intellectuals came, many patriots were there in India, but they were not like, they cannot match with Dadabhai Naoroji. Many intellectuals have worked, many patriots or the Deshbhakts might have worked, but there is no one like Dadabhai Naoroji. So that shows that how great a man he is or he was. So this is about Dadabhai Naoroji.